After scoring a big success with the animated show Phineas and Ferb, Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh immediately started to work on their next television series for Disney. Named Milo Murphy's Law, the show centers on Milo, who, owing to his name, has to deal with everything going wrong and how he tries to avert it with his quick thinking and trusty backpack full of accessories. These can range from minor annoyances to major catastrophes, and yet he retains an optimistic attitude about this trait that has been passed down to each male member of his family. Milo often participates in adventures with his two friends, Melissa and Zach, who also find themselves in the middle of these wild situations. Milo is further joined by his family, his dog, and other people in his life, and over the course of the series, you really do get to know the entire town and everyone who is a part of Milo's life. Honestly, it's kind of impressive the Murphys have not been run out of town. In the real world, if there existed a family that has disaster follow them at every turn, I don't think people would be nearly as forgiving. Although you do still have characters who react in fear and annoyance to Milo and Murphy's Law. He has a classmate named Bradley, who frequently complains that Milo deserves more blame for everything that goes wrong, and is often bothered by his chipper attitude. The early episodes set him up to be a major antagonist of the series, but he becomes less prominent as the show goes on. The antagonist who eventually gets more focus is a crossing guard named Elliot. He's portrayed as obsessed with maintaining safety, so his constant attempts to keep Murphy's Law under control make sense, and there's some humor born out of this. Impressively, Elliot is voiced by Christian Slater, and I did not even realize it was him until I saw his name in the credits. One of Povenmire Marsh's strengths is how they build the town the shows are set in, and the way they tie this into the show's running gags. However, while Phineas and Ferb made all the episodes follow a specific formula, Milo Murphy's Law is a bit more serialized in its approach, and there's more variety in how the plots are structured. For the first few episodes, the show is amusing enough, but the more you grow familiar with the characters and how Murphy's Law functions, the funnier it gets. One of my favorite aspects of Milo Murphy's Law comes from a pair of time travelers. Cavendish and Dakota start off as just minor background characters selling pistachios, but as they're given more screen time, we find out what their actual purpose is and their role in the story. Even the pistachio thing, which at first appears to be a simple running gag, builds towards something more important with bigger implications for the world. Although it's best not to think too much about the time travel aspect. Sometimes the show follows Back to the Future rules, with characters' changes in the past affecting the future. Other times it's implied that the past has already been altered. It's not very consistent. I really like the dynamic between Cavendish and Dakota, with some episodes taking a sweet turn as we find out just how important they are to each other, although it helps that they're voiced by the show's creators. There's also a show, In-Universe, obviously inspired by Doctor Who, and this is something else that initially exists to highlight Milo's sister Sarah being a fangirl and then builds to something bigger. I should probably mention that Milo is voiced by Weird Al Yankovic, who I'm surprised never guest starred on Phineas and Ferb. He has done voice work on so many animated shows, voicing either himself or a new character, so you would think he would have popped up in a show noted for its inventive humor and catchy songs. It's wonderful he finally got to be in a Povenmire Marsh production though, and as the lead character no less. He does a great job of voicing Milo and showcasing his positive attitude and his problem solving. Fittingly, there are a few nods to Weird Al himself, most notably Milo's skill at playing the accordion. The show does not feature a song per episode like Phineas and Ferb did, but there's still a decent amount of them throughout the series. Surprisingly, Weird Al only sings a portion of them, but they found the right ones for him to perform. The biggest oddity is that Sabrina Carpenter, who voices Melissa, does not perform a single song. I've read one theory that her music contract prevented her from singing on Milo Murphy's Law, but that does not add up, as she was contracted by Disney's music label at the time and sang on other Disney productions, including the theme song for Andy Mack. So there has to be another reason Melissa never got a musical number. Throughout the first season, there are hints that Milo Murphy's Law is set in Danville, the setting of Phineas and Ferb. The final episode of Season 1 then reveals the show does indeed take place in the same universe as Povenmire Marsh's previous show. The second season premieres even a full-blown crossover, with Phineas, Ferb, Candace, and other characters appearing. It's neat seeing them show up and interact with Milo and friends. You might be wondering how they never crossed paths before, but the characters are at different ages and in different grades. So until the events of that episode, there probably was not a reason for them to have met. Phineas and Ferb never appear again, but someone who becomes a significant character in Milo Murphy's Law is Dr. Doofenshmirtz. After his building is destroyed, he winds up living with the Murphy family, and is the focus of some episodes. Even Perry the Platypus appears several times to check in on him. I've seen gripes that Doofenshmirtz takes over the show in the second season, and I understand why some fans would have that criticism. There are even a few episodes Milo is barely in. However, I was not bothered by his presence, primarily because of how funny he is. We still get many of his innators, except he's now trying to use them for good, rather than taking over the tri-state area. There's also a lot of humor gained out of him shoehorning himself into the Murphys' lives, with him especially getting on Sarah's nerves. Doofenshmirtz starts hanging out with Dakota too, and there are quite a few meta lines related to the fact that both were voiced by Dan Povermeyer. Honestly, some of my biggest laughs in the second season came courtesy of Doofenshmirtz. There's also a nice element of Milo being encouraging towards Dr. D, even though many of his inventions blow up in his face. During the second season, there's an interesting plot thread that starts developing involving aliens. Not only does this affect Milo, but it gives Cavendish a big arc of his own. There's a particularly funny episode where Cavendish tries to show the alien spaceship that has crash-landed, but a broken cloaking device and other mishaps keep preventing that. This storyline with the aliens further highlights Milo's frequent helpfulness, even though Murphy's Law is the cause for many of the problems that arise. For whatever reason, Disney did not seem to have the same enthusiasm for Milo Murphy's Law that they had for Phineas and Ferb, and did not push it as much. They bizarrely chose to premiere new episodes at 7 a.m., while switching the show from Disney XD to Disney Channel in its second season only marginally helped it in the ratings. It sort of reminds me of what happened with Futurama. Despite it coming from Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, Fox would often move it around the schedule and did other things that stopped the show from building a significant audience. Milo Murphy's Law ended after 2 seasons, but the final episode makes it obvious Povermeyer and Marsh had more stories they wanted to tell. Milo was originally going to have a cameo in the second Phineas and Ferb movie, Candace Against the Universe, but his scene was cut as they were worried viewers would blame some of the problems that arise on Murphy's Law. It was recently announced that Disney had ordered 2 new seasons of Phineas and Ferb, so maybe there's a possibility Milo could show up in that series. Unfortunately, Dan Povermeyer said the chances of Milo Murphy's Law being revived are slim. That's a shame, as Milo Murphy's Law is a clever and very funny show with that characteristic Povermeyer-Marsh humor. I understand the temptation to compare it to Phineas and Ferb, and the second season certainly invites those comparisons, but I think the show more than works on its own terms. They find all sorts of fun ways to utilize Murphy's Law and show how Milo navigates his day-to-day life, even as all the things going wrong pile up. I really like that Dan Povermeyer and Jeff Marsh seem mostly interested in telling stories about friendly, upbeat characters who try to make the most of their abilities to brighten other people's day and wake up with a drive to do something exciting. Milo is an immensely likable character, and is aided by Weird Al's voice work. He's someone we're more than happy to watch, along with his 2 best friends, time-traveling chums, and the scientist in the backyard. See you next time.